Can you imagine hearing that sound at 5 a.m. in the morning after maybe a very haunting and horrific experience watching your neighbors and others killed, shot down? Hi, I'm Marcus Holmes. I'm the facilitator of the Love and Stuff community. And 100 years ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Tulsa Race Massacre occurred and ended in countless deaths. Some say as high as 300, though the official record is much lower. 40 square blocks decimated and lives forever changed. I wanted to share this platform, though I had the expressed privilege to be on a platform yesterday with Love and Stuff's own Mama V, Pastor Valencia Etner. But I wanted to have as part of our discussion just some lessons that we have learned. There are too many lessons to enumerate here. And as a part of her work, Pastor Valencia and others like Reverend Darren Williams will continue these conversations and work, of which I will invite you and give you an opportunity to stay connected to them. But I wanted to have some discussion in the Love and Stuff community about this massacre. And I hope that you will click share, whether you're watching via restream on Facebook, on Twitch TV, YouTube events. I hope that you will click share and tag someone to join us in this discussion. These are just lessons that I am gleaning. Some of them are lessons that I am gleaning from this 100th year anniversary, if you will call it that, commemoration, reflection. But there are many more lessons, and I invite you to do some of your own research to learn more about a massacre that has literally been silent for many years. As I shared yesterday, I heard first in the 70s about this Negro or Black Wall Street. Back in 1979, I'm guessing, I would have been about 9 years old at that time. And I was a part of what is called the Wolverine State Baptist Convention. And there were folks within that back in organization, particularly two women who stand out in my mind are Rosa Fowler and Willie Mae Murkison, who I first heard use the term Negro Wall Street or Black Wall Street. And then later in the 80s, I heard about the Tulsa Race Riot, as it was called. And calling it a riot, there could be a lot of different people that might articulate different reasons why it would be called a riot, but it certainly wouldn't have been the first and only riot. And so I think more appropriately, if we think of it as a pogrom, more appropriately, maybe we could have that discussion. But I certainly want for you to click share and tag someone to join in this sharing of lessons. I'll call it just sharing of lessons. And again, I'm going to drop a link in the comments that you will be able to utilize to get a piece of that history, as well as just track with Valencia Etner and others who will continue these discussions. And so I'm going to drop that link in the comment now. You will get a chance to get B.C. Franklin's actual writing of his account, which is something that you can also get on other places and platforms. But I want to make sure that you can have it, and that will allow you to keep up with the work that Valencia Etner is doing as well. And so if you sign up for that document by clicking on that link that you see populating now, you'll be able to follow along with us as these conversations grow and deepen. And so I want to make sure that you could get that document from B.C. Franklin about his account of what happened. And later on, we're going to share from Mary Jones Parrish writing some of her personal account, eyewitness account of what occurred during that time as well. So I hope that you will click share and tag someone to join us in the discussion. At first, when you heard that sound of the train, I hope you were able to hear the train whistle or dog whistle, maybe it was. One might think that it was a clarion call for peace, but it was really a clarion call that white folks were going to come into the Black neighborhoods and really attack and decimate everything that was there. It was the sound of an onslaught, of an attempted pogrom, I keep saying that word, to complete the wiping away of Black people, and in some degree, the wiping away of the memory of that attack on Black people, because it was not spoken of widely. Just now, many people are seeing documentaries and hearing a lot more about this this horrible tragedy, as I heard Darren Williams say, this Holocaust. And it has, because of those memories of Wolverine State Baptist Convention, it also has some personal thought and memory to me. My maternal great-grandmother, whose name was Kate, is believed to have been 100% Indian. That's where you get some of that great bone structure, I think, from, maybe. And she lived she lived not far from Greenwood, Mississippi. She would have lived in Vaden, Mississippi, where my dad was born, and then moved to Water Valley, Mississippi, all not very far from Greenwood, Mississippi, where the original name of Greenwood District comes from. But it was given that name, of course, by Booker T. Washington, or modeled after his demonstration in Tuskegee, Alabama. But Greenwood, Mississippi is a real place as well. And so I'm very interested to learn more, though some of the trails seem deadened around my great-grandmother Kate, and information in her later years of life. I know that she was married twice, and I'm wondering maybe there was some connection to some of these great tribes, which I'm going to share about just a little bit in a minute, or mention in a moment. So from May 31st and to June 1st today, 100 years ago, the Tulsa Race Massacre claimed the lives of hundreds of people. Some say as high as 300, though officially the number is much lower. Properties and businesses destroyed, and 40 square blocks that was owned and operated by Blacks completely decimated, or for the most part decimated. And so I want to give a little bit of context around some of that time, because there are, of course, as I have learned, were several migrations heading there, right? But I want to talk a little bit about, and what I think it leads up to this first lesson that I want to share with you, about names you've recalled, Edward McCabe, and you've heard Stratford and O.W. Hurley. These were people who went to this area and became millionaires, really. And Edward McCabe was involved in trying to make Black states and Black cities in various places, and went to Washington, D.C. to do that, not quite successfully, but he planted that seed. And so others went to this area, which was undeveloped, but was in the time of the oil boom, right? And so various tribes who had enslaved Africans, such as the Seminoles, Chickasaws, Choctaws, Cherokees, Muskego, I keep saying it wrong, Muskegee Creeks. They had freed slaves, or free colored people, who received land allotments. And so that oil boom and the land allotments were the perfect place to get this opportunity of wealth and to build. And so by 1905, Booker T. Washington, who was touring Arkansas and the Indian Territory rather, and Oklahoma and Greenwood, a district in Tulsa, was organized in 1906, again, patterned after his demonstration in Tuskegee, Alabama. And it became so prosperous that he, Booker T. Washington, called it the Negro Wall Street. and the Negro Wall Street it was. Black Americans had created their own businesses and owned the land and built those buildings and businesses. And it included doctors and lawyers and dentists and clergymen. It included grocers and 2 newspapers and 2 movie theaters. Lula Williams, I think, in 3 movie theaters, the nightclubs and numerous churches, some of them built in grandeur and fashion. And the nails shoemakers, their furriers, hotels, the Gurley Hotel, the Stratford Hotel, among many others, and a Black hospital. So it was a booming and bustling area that Black people owned and built. So I kind of think as the first lesson, at least for me, of many lessons that I want to share, and I hope that you will click share and tag some folks to join us. I hope that we can see is that we have always been a communal people. Community is a way of life for us, so much so that it's in our DNA. Whether we are bond or free, whether we were enslaved or not, we were a tribal people. Not just in Tulsa, a tribal people. We long, desire, and flourish when we unite and when we assist others in building up our community. I did mention, right, that it was 40 square blocks that weren't just occupied by Black people and that weren't just Black-run businesses, but they were also built and owned by Black people, all owned by them. I want you to think about that. If there is a lesson in that, I think of many lessons that could be in that, is that it is in our DNA to be part of the community, to be part of the village, to be caretakers of each other, and to see each other win. You know, Darren Williams was sharing yesterday that in that blessed community, that the dollar turned over 12 times before it left the community. Can you or I say that about where we live today? What are we committed to do about our dollars turning over in our own community? About building, and then, as Edward McCabe and others did, buying and securing property to sell to other African Americans so that they can also build and buy property. Where is that collective cooperation among our community? Which I think is so important. Justice Booker T. Washington did during his trip to Tulsa in 1905 or thereabout. We should encourage the cooperation, the economic independence, and the excellence that was being demonstrated in Tulsa. That was the great thing that was demonstrated, and we should adopt and demonstrate in our areas. And I know sometimes we say, well, Black business costs so much. And I know that we say, well, their customer service isn't always what we want it to be. Let's cooperatively work together so that we are excellent together. They also enjoy relative prosperity and participated, as I aforementioned, in the oil boom. Thank you for joining us, those that are on various platforms. So that's that first lesson, that DNA runs deeply, in our DNA runs deeply this sense of community, whether we are bond or free. And when we are free, it calls us to cooperate, to gain economic independence, and to promote and demonstrate excellence. That is who we are. It's in our DNA, as much as it was in all of those newly freed Africans, newly freed colored people in Greenwood District. I want to pivot slightly to talk about the climate a little bit, in part, that had been brewing during that time. I said earlier that when people characterized Oklahoma, Tulsa as a riot, it wasn't the first riot of its kind, right? There had been other riots that had happened long before that, and especially during that time, which may have added to this brewing pot, if you will, of race riots and massacres. So we learned that Greenwood was in 1906 established. And then in 1907, November 16th, Oklahoma became a state, right? And it was admitted as a state. And with that came Jim Crow laws, right? The Ku Klux Klan, right? KKK, and white supremacy followed as a part of what would be happening in that state. As a matter of fact, there was on August 4th, I believe around 1916, in Tulsa, there was an ordinance that was passed. It mandated that there was residential segregation, and it forbade Black and white people from residing on any block where there was 3/4 of the other residents or more. So if there were 3/4 or more of white people, Black people couldn't live there, and vice versa. Now, the United States Supreme Court overturned that ordinance as unconstitutional the following year, but many cities continued, as well as Tulsa, to establish and enforce these kind of segregation practices for many decades that followed after that. Okay. And then we have in 1919 what is called the Red Summer, right? And there's this steadily growing tension, right? The war, World War I has ended, right? In late 1918. And African Americans are migrating from rural South to cities of the North, right? And servicemen are returning home from fighting in Europe to find out that those colored people have gotten their jobs, right? That they thought were their jobs in factories and warehouses and mills. These newly arrived folks had gotten their jobs, right? So there was this financial insecurity and prejudice around that, right? And then the African American veterans who had risked their lives for this cause of freedom and democracy, they found themselves denied basic rights, such as adequate housing and equality under the law, whatever that should mean, right? And they became increasingly militant. Okay, so that's brewing. This tension is happening, right? Then Tulsa founder and Ku Klux Klan member W.T. Brady, he's participating, he's building back up, his forces, and he's said to have led the tarring and feathering of a group of men in 1917, right? So now you start to see the Ku Klux Klan reviving and raising its head, right? Sounding familiar? So then there were industrial cities throughout the Midwest and Northeast where there were race riots, where whites, sometimes including the authorities, were attacking Black communities, right? And so you see these in places like, I think there were 64 or so lynchings in 1918, 83 in 1919. And in that summer, known as the Red Summer, there would be race riots in Washington, D.C., and Knoxville, Tennessee, and Longview, Texas, and Phillip County, Arkansas, and Omaha, Nebraska, and other places. And I say most dramatically, but in Chicago, where I speak the name of Eugene Williams, who was swimming and swam beyond the boundaries of Blacks and going into the whites only, to which he was stoned. They threw stones and he drowned. So all of this is brewing. And then in 1920, there was in Tulsa the lynching of the white murder suspect, Ray Belton. So all of this stuff is happening, and all of this stuff makes for a brew of a very tense racial and political environment and social milieu, right? So environment that is very tense. And there's this new sheriff in town, right? This new sheriff decides that he's going to do what needs to be done to ensure that the kinds of things that happened before him doesn't happen. And I don't know if that is an example of interest convergence. I'm not sure his intent was so much to protect this young man, but so the story goes. So in 1921, May 30th, this young 19-year-old shoe shiner, Dick Rowland, in a hotel elevator, allegedly grabs the arm of 17-year-old elevator operator Sarah Page as he heads to the nearest restroom that's restricted for Blacks only, right? And he flees when she screams. He is subsequently arrested. And the Tulsa white paper says, Negro nab for assaulting, or nab Negro for attacking girl in an elevator. And I think that next lesson that we have to learn, because media and local authorities have as much power as we give them. And so I believe another lesson, again, among many, you could pull out 1,000 lessons here. 1,000 lessons you could pull out here. But we must choose, like they did in Greenwood, our leaders. And we must choose politicians wisely. And we must withdraw support from media outlets that do not accurately portray our stories. Things like mob members were deputized by police and instructed to get a gun and get a nigger. After, they say, 60 or so Black men came, many of them in their veteran uniforms, because they wanted to secure and ensure that Dick Rowland would not be lynched. And we're told, no, we got this, go on back home. But because those white folks saw, and white folks are sometimes in fear of the unity of Black people, they left to go get guns and were told by some, supposedly, allegedly, get a gun and get a nigger. The amount of complicit behavior among law officials, local law enforcement authorities, McCullough and others who would not publicly say that he told the Black people to come down there because something was going to happen, added to this tense environment. And we must be aware, in my second lesson of thought, at least, that we've got to choose leaders, politicians, wisely. We got to be engaged in the process. And we've got to withdraw our support from these media outlets that do not accurately portray us. I wanted to read a part of Buck Colbert Franklin's 10-page typewritten letter that was authored by him, who is also the father of John Hope Franklin, a noted historian. He writes, "Lurid flames roared and belched and licked their forked tongues into the air. Smoke ascended the sky in thick black volumes, and amid it all, the planes, now a dozen or more in number, still hummed and darted here and there with the agility of natural birds of the air. Planes circling in midair, they grew in number and hummed, darted, and dipped low. I could hear something like hail falling upon the top of my office building. Down East Archer, I saw the old Midway Hotel on fire, burning from its top, and then another and another and another building beginning to burn from their top. The sidewalks were literally covered with burning turpentine balls. I knew all too well where they came from, and I knew all too well why every burning building first caught fire from the top. I paused and waited for an opportune time to escape. Where, oh, where is our splendid fire department with its half-dozen stations? I asked myself. Is the city in conspiracy with the mob? The commercial section of Greenwood was destroyed. Losses included 191 businesses, a junior high school, several churches, and the only hospital in the district. The Red Cross reported that 1,256 houses were burned and another 215 were looted but not burned. The Tulsa Real Estate Exchange estimated property losses amounting to 1.5 million in real estate and 750 in personal property, equivalent to a total of more than 33 million in today's time. The Red Cross reported on December 21st, 1921, estimated that 10,000 people were made homeless by the destruction. Over the next year, local citizens filed more than $1.8 million in riot-related claims against the city, which amounts to over $26 million today. Those claims were denied because of riot exclusions in policy, and that doesn't include the places that did not have insurance, right? It was because of a riot exclusion instead of the failure of the fire department, the police department, and the complicity of both. Which brings me to another lesson that I think is important, and I'm seeing in some of the comments, Back to the Future. So what did they do? Many of them did leave and retreated and fled, but many rebuilt with their own money. Many Black families spent the winter in tents as they worked to rebuild. Rebuilding while the city passed a fire ordinance preventing them, from rebuilding. Rebuilding while city planners saw the fire that destroyed homes and businesses across Greenwood as a fortunate incident that would be able to help them advance their objectives to rezone the burned area for industrial use, to make the pathway for a larger train depot near the heart that was scheduled to be built in the heart of the city, rather, to be built in Greenwood instead. They rebuilt. In their DNA, as is in yours and mine, is to rebuild. There is a grit and resilience in you that is being tried and tested even today. I submit to you. And like them, when you have no other help or hope or assistance or subsidy, you must rebuild. Even when there are detractors and naysayers and haters and blockers, you must rebuild. It may require a long winter or a hot summer, but the stuff that you're made of says rebuild. You may have to retreat. You may have to regroup, but rebuild and move and navigate with the resilience and grit that you are made of. Yes, there were survivors. And like them, in this last lesson among many lessons, we must never give up. So 3 survivors, Mother Leslie Benningfield Randall, known as Mother Randall, is 106 years old. And here are some of the words from her. She says, and I quote, "I have lived through the massacre every day. I'm sorry, those are Viola Fletcher's words, who is 107. I apologize. Our country may forget this history, but I cannot. Viola's brother, Hughes Van Ellis, who is known as Uncle Red, who is 100 years old, who is a World War II veteran, says, because of the massacre, my family was driven out of our home. We were left with nothing. We were laid refugees in our own country. Our childhood was hard and we didn't have much. We worried what little we had would be stolen from us, just like it was stolen in Tulsa. I fought for freedom abroad, even though it was ripped away from me at home. My home and my community were destroyed. It's because I believe in the end, America will get this right. When I returned home from the war, I didn't find any of this freedom I was fighting for overseas. Unlike white servicemen, I wasn't entitled to GI Bill benefits because of the color of my skin. We lived with it every day. We live with it every day, and the thought of what Greenwood was and what it could have been. We aren't just black and white pictures on a screen. We are flesh and blood. I was there when it happened. I'm still here. We must never give up. To think of these centurions and to think of all that they have endured and still fighting for reparations, still fighting to be made whole. The lesson and one of the lessons I think we learn from them is to never give up. You may have to fight, and no one else may tell your story. As a matter of fact, someone may try to make you forget the story or make you think that the tragedy of the story was your fault. That's okay. It's not okay, but don't let it deter you. Don't let it allow you to give up. Tell your story. You know your story, and your story needs to be heard so that it cannot be repeated again. I want to share with you a few excerpts from this book. The Nation Must Awake, from Mary Jones Parrish. I would that you would purchase the book. It is available on Amazon. There are a couple of excerpts from it that I'd like to read. She shares some of this is post June 1st, 1921. She writes, leaving the Red Cross headquarters, I went over to the YMCA tent. There were gathered many people shaking hands and greeting each other like soldiers following a great battle. All seemed anxious to relate his or her experience. This organization furnished cold water for many thirsty throats. It also had a relief department in one side and 2 women employed to distribute clothing. Here one felt free to come and spend hours meeting friends. Posted in conspicuous places over the grounds around these places were lists of letters and telegrams. In order to help the people get in touch with their loved ones who were anxious to hear from them, Mr. Theo Ballman of the Oklahoma Sun succeeded in getting out a little daily paper, and each day he would publish these lists. Each day the people sat under the tent and watched for these lists, as well as for the list of the dead in the big dailies. On arriving home this afternoon, I found Brother Edward, who had risked the danger of passing by armed guards. Entrances to our district were heavily guarded, and everyone was required to have a police protection badge to enter, to come for me. He insisted that I return home with him. Again, I resolved to stay in Tulsa and see the outcome of this calamity. Days passed without any important change in matters. Everyone seemed nervous and undecided what to do. Brother Harrison had written to me to come to him at Langston. I was preparing to go when I was engaged by Reverend H.T.S. Johnson of the Interracial Commission to do some reporting for that organization. This proved to be an interesting occupation, for it helped me to forget my trouble in sympathy for the people with whom I daily came in contact. Up to this time, I had worn no badge. A lady friend and I had business uptown one very rainy day, and on returning home, we were approached by a guard who demanded to see our cards. On being told we had no cards, we were accordingly ordered to return to the city hall and get them. This was a perplexity for us in that one had to have some white person vouch for them, regardless of their station in life before the trouble. We went to the city hall. There I met Professor Gregg, executive secretary of the YMCA. We explained our plight to him. He in turn offered to assist us. He explained to an officer in charge that I had been engaged in YMCA work, even showed him the check for 3 months' work, which he had just paid me. This check was signed by the executive secretary of the Central YMCA uptown, yet it would not serve as a passport to secure a card. As I had never worked for any white person in Tulsa, I was at a loss just what to do. It was plainly shown that a white man's word was the only requirement to receive a card. I pondered just what to do. Then I thought of a business firm and called them up. They came down and identified me, and that was sufficient. I received my card without any trouble. The primary rooms of the Booker T. Washington School were converted into an emergency hospital, she writes. I can never erase the sights of my first visit to the hospital. There were men wounded in every conceivable way, like soldiers after a big battle. Some with amputated limbs, burned faces, others minus an eye or with heads bandaged. There were women who were nervous wrecks and some confinement cases. Was I in a hospital in France? No, in Tulsa. One mother was so thoughtless as to burden her infant for life with the name of June Riot. The Tulsa disaster has taught great lessons to all of us, has dissipated some of our false creeds, and has revealed to us verities of which we were oblivious. The most significant lesson, she writes, has taught me is that the love of race is the deepest feeling rooted in our being, and that no race can rise higher than its lowest member. Some of our group who have been blessed with educational or financial advantages are oftentimes inclined to forget ourselves to the extent that they feel their superiority over those less fortunate. But when a supreme test like the Tulsa disaster comes, it serves to remind us that we are all of one race, that humans, fiends, like those who have full sway on June 1st, have no respect of person. Every Negro was accorded the same treatment, regardless of his education or other advantages. A Negro was a Negro on that day and was forced to march with his hands up for blocks. What does this teach? It should teach us to look up, lift up, and lend a helping hand. And remember that we cannot rise higher than our weakest brother. Comfort the feeble-minded, support the weak. She quotes from 1 Thessalonians 5:14. And believe me, I wanted to say 1 Thessalonians, but that would not be right. I think I did just say it. I wanted to share that excerpt, and I hope that you will read The Nation Must Awake in its entirety and other lessons. There are many, too many, as I stated, to enumerate. But in the Love and Stuff community, I wanted to share those lessons with you because I think it's important that we understand that there in our DNA, down deep on the inside, is this sense of community. Whether we are bond or free, whether we see the Tulsa disaster as Mary Jones Parrish writes, or the Tulsa Race Massacre, or the terrorist attacks on Washington at the Capitol Hill, or George Floyd's murder, whatever we're faced with, there is something about us that is communal, that calls us to the yoke that connects us to the necks, to the hearts of those that are in our village and community. And we must raise that up. We must be responsible for each other. We must understand that in these atrocities, some of them which are part brought about by a brew, a stew of things that are brewing, but that there are authorities and those in leadership that are complicit. And so we must choose our leaders wisely. We must galvanize our economic independence and lift others up and build and own. We must know that we are resilient, that we have grit, that we must never, never, never give up, that we must rebuild, even in the face of gross negligence and atrocities and complicit actions and behaviors of those who are in the position to do right. And we must tell our stories. Each of us in the Love and Stuff community and the greater community has a story. Do not be fooled. There is someone who wants to convince you that your story isn't real, that it did not happen the way you experienced it, and for some, that it did not happen. But you should remember what happens and has happened so that it empowers you to work so that it never happens again. May God bless the memory and lives of all of the families and people involved in the Tulsa Race Massacre. And may we, through this horrific example and Holocaust, learn lessons that we can put into our daily life to make a difference in our community and in the world. That link is there for you to click on. It is the opportunity for you to get a free copy, a copy of the 10-page letter written by B.C. Franklin about his experiences. I want you to have that, and you can go to the Smithsonian page and get it there. It is an actual photograph of his actual writing, which I think is pretty cool for you to have. And we would just, in exchange for that, ask for your name and your email address. And I will connect that information to Pastor Valencia Etner because more discussions are coming. And so I wanted to have our discussion in the Love and Stuff community, and she's a valued member of our community, as well as Darren Williams, who sat on the panel with Dr. Camone. But I also wanted for people who want to learn more and want to be involved in more of the conversation and dialogue, to tell the stories and then to put the work in a way that rebuilds lives, people, and communities, to be connected to those conversations that will continue. And so if you're interested, please click on that link. 2 quick pieces of information. It will email you automatically the document that you can have, and it will give us an opportunity to stay in touch with you as more of those discussions are formulated and more of those conversations, because your voice, your love matters. It's 9:16. We're going to end slightly early today. I'm going to go through the comments, and I hope that you will share this information with others. I see. Thank you so much. So many of you that have come through. Thank you so much, Derek Atlas, Karen Poole. Thank you so much. Darren Williams, Christina Smith. Yes. Burning from the top. Yeah, the trauma yet resilient. Yes. Darlene Duffy Collins. No race can rise higher than its lowest member. Thank you for that. Amy Charles. Thank you all for joining us. Wendy Walker. Vicki Johnson Williams, thank you all for joining us. I hope that you will click share this content. Again, the conversations continue, and we like to keep you involved in those conversations. So you can click follow by following us on Love and Stuff. You can go to V Encouragement Ministries, click follow there, or you can get this document to have your own, to see BC Franklin's actual written letters, and you can hold on to that. And as we have more conversations and discussions, we will make sure that you are in the loop for those times and dates so that your voice can be a part of the dialogue. I'm Marcus Holmes. It's been a great Love and Stuff. I hope you will enjoy the rest of your night and join us on the gratefulness journey every day. It is still available. It's now available on Apple Books as well, iBooks. So you can get the Gratefulness Journey every day on iBooks and Barnes & Noble, as Kobo, and on Amazon. Any of those places. We'd love for you to pick up your copy of the book. And also the Sports Talk with Kamau and Felix, our newest show. It's going well. And I believe their next show is in 2 weeks. You'll be hearing more information about that. And as we prepare to get to Father's Day, what a wonderful Father's Day weekend. Starting on June 18th, we will have our second movie night. You don't want to miss it. Love and Stuff's own Dickie Mason has a film that has gone to the film festival, and he's going to be sharing that film with you. A couple other filmmakers, some great prizes and opportunities, some great music. That will be on June 18th, access only. And so you'll see more about how to get your ticket to that. And then on Father's Day, of course, we will do a Father's Day tribute, and we need your Father's Day videos. If you are a father, or if you had a great relationship with your father, we definitely want your short video that we can include in the tribute on Father's Day. We told you, as we did for Mother's Day, we're singing the praises of fathers. We know that all fathers are not absent. There are fathers that are actively involved in loving their families and their children, and we want to celebrate you. So inbox us at Love and Stuff and let us know when we can expect your video. A short video of 1 or 2 minutes would be great, and we will include it in our presentation on Father's Day afternoon. Have a grateful rest of your evening, and we'll see you soon, hopefully in some of the Love and Stuff content, and have a great night.